Hello, Sophomore World Lit and Contemporary Lit. I am going to read the first part of Chapter 4 today. It's about 10 pages. So I'm going to read that out loud, and as I read, you should have your study guide with you, and you should be copying down the study guide answers as I read, because while we are remote, I am not going to be posting the study guide answers anymore. You are responsible for filling out your own study guide. If you have questions over the study guide, every day I will have a Zoom from 11 to noon, and you can just click on this Zoom link right here and join that Zoom at any time from 11 to noon, Monday through Friday, okay? Otherwise, you should just be filling out your study guide on your own. Contemporary Lit, it's the same for you, okay? And your class is also set up the same way. So if you don't have your packet, because say you weren't here on Friday when we learned we were going remote, and so you don't have your study guide packet with you, go to this night folder and go down to study guide packet, click on this. You can just write your answers down on a loose leaf sheet of paper, take a picture of it, and submit it for your assignment, okay? So there is a way that you can do this. I, though, am going to begin reading, so as I'm doing this, just make sure that you are filling out your study guide, okay? Beginning of Chapter 4. The camp looked as though it had been through an epidemic, empty and dead. Only a few well-dressed inmates were wandering in between the blocks. Of course, we had to pass through the showers. The head of the camp joined us there. He was a stocky man with big shoulders, the neck of a bull, thick lips, and curly hair. He gave an impression of kindness. From time to time, a smile would linger in his gray-blue eyes. Our convoy included a few 10- and 12-year-olds. The officer took an interest in them and gave orders to bring them food. We were given new clothing and settled into 2 tents. We were to wait there until we could be incorporated into the work commandos. Then we would be assigned to a block. In the evening, the commandos returned from the work yards. Roll call. We began looking for people we knew, asking the veterans which work commandos were the best and which block one should try to enter. All the inmates agreed. Buna is a very good camp. One can hold one's own here. The most important thing is to not be assigned to the construction commando, as if we had a choice. Our tent leader was a German, an assassin's face, fleshy lips, hands resembling a wolf's paws. The camp's food had agreed with him. He could hardly move. He was so fat. Like the head of the camp, he liked children. Immediately after our arrival, he had bread brought for them, some soup and margarine. In fact, this affection was not entirely altruistic. There existed here a veritable traffic of children among homosexuals, I learned later. He told us, "You will stay with me for 3 days in quarantine. Afterward, you will go to work. Tomorrow, medical checkup." One of his aides, a tough-looking boy with shifty eyes, came over to me. "Would you like to get into a good commando?" "Of course, but on one condition. I want to stay with my father." "All right," he said, "I can arrange it. For a pittance, your shoes. I'll give you another pair." I refused to give him my shoes. They were all I had left. "I'll also give you a ration of bread with some margarine." He liked my shoes. I would not let him have them. Later, they were taken away from me anyway, in exchange for nothing that time. The medical checkup took place outside, early in the morning, before 3 doctors seated on a bench. The first hardly examined me. He just asked, "Are you in good health?" Who would have dared to admit the opposite? On the other hand, the dentist seemed more conscientious. He asked me to open my mouth wide. In fact, he was not looking for decay, but for gold teeth. Those who had gold in their mouths were listed by their number. I did have a gold crown. The first 3 days went by quickly. On the 4th day, as we stood in front of our tent, the capos appeared. Each one began to choose the men he liked. You, you, you. They pointed their fingers, the way one might choose cattle or merchandise. We followed our capo, a young man. He made us halt at the door of the first block near the entrance to the camp. This was the orchestra's block. He motioned us inside. We were surprised. What had we to do with the music? The orchestra was playing a military march, always the same. Dozens of commandos were marching off in step to the work yards. The capos were beating the time. Left, right, left, right. SS officers, pen in hand, recorded the number of men leaving. The orchestra continued to play the same march until the last commando had passed. Then the conductor's baton stopped moving and the orchestra fell silent. The capo yelled, "Fall in." We fell into ranks of 5 with the musicians. We left the camp without music, but in step. We still had the march in our ears. Left, right, left, right. We struck up conversations with our neighbors, the musicians. Almost all of them were Jews. Juliek, a Pole with eyeglasses and a cynical smile and a pale face. Louis, a native of Holland, a well-known violinist. He complained that they would not let him play Beethoven. Jews were not allowed to play German music. Hans, the young man from Berlin, was full of wit. The foreman was a Pole. Franek, a former student in Warsaw. Juliek explained to me. We work in a warehouse of electrical materials, not far from here. The work is neither difficult nor dangerous. Only Idek, the capo, occasionally has fits of madness, and then you'd better stay out of his way. You are lucky, little fellow, said Hans, smiling. You fell into the good commando. 10 minutes later, we stood in front of the warehouse. A German employee, a civilian, the Meister, came to meet us. He paid as much attention to us as would a shopkeeper receiving a delivery of old rags. Our comrades were right. The work was not difficult. Sitting on the ground, we counted bolts, bulbs, and various small electrical parts. The capo launched into a lengthy explanation of the importance of this work, warning us that anyone who proved to be lazy would be held accountable. My new comrades reassured me. Don't worry. He has to say this because of the Meister. There were many Polish civilians here and a few French women as well. The women silently greeted the musicians with their eyes. Franek, the foreman, assigned me to a corner. Don't kill yourself, there's no hurry, but watch out. Don't let an SS catch you. Please, sir, I'd like to be near my father. All right, your father will work here, next to you. We were lucky. 2 boys came to join our group, Yossi and Tibi, 2 brothers from Czechoslovakia, whose parents had been exterminated in Birkenau. They lived for each other, body and soul. They quickly became my friends. Having once belonged to a Zionist youth organization, they knew countless Hebrew songs, and so we would sometimes hum melodies evoking the gentle waters of the Jordan River and the majestic sanctity of Jerusalem. We also spoke often about Palestine. Their parents, like mine, had not had the courage to sell everything and emigrate while there was still time. We decided that if we were allowed to live until the liberation, we would not stay another day in Europe. We would board the first ship to Haifa. Still lost in his Kabbalistic dreams, Akiba Dremer had discovered a verse from the Bible, which translated into numbers, made it possible for him to predict their redemption in the weeks to come. We had left the tents for the musicians' block. We were now entitled to a blanket, a washbowl, and a bar of soap. The Blockel test was a German Jew. It was good to have a Jew as your leader. His name was Alphonse, a young man with startling wizened face. He was totally devoted to defending his block. Whenever he could, he would organize a cauldron of soup for the young, for the weak, for all those who dreamed more of an extra portion of food than of liberty. One day, when we had returned from the warehouse, I was summoned by the block secretary. A7713? That's me. After your meal, you'll go to the dentist. But I don't have a toothache. After your meal, without fail. I went to the infirmary block. Some 20 prisoners were waiting in line at the entrance. It didn't take long to learn the reason for our summons. Our gold teeth were to be extracted. The dentist, a Jew from Czechoslovakia, had a face not unlike a death mask. When he opened his mouth, one had a ghastly vision of yellow, rotten teeth. Seated in the chair, I asked meekly, "What are you going to do, sir?" "I shall remove your gold crown, that's all," he said, clearly indifferent. I thought of pretending to be sick. "Couldn't you wait a few days, sir? I don't feel well. I have a fever." He wrinkled his brow, thought for a moment, and took my pulse. "All right, son, come back to see me when you feel better, but don't wait for me to call you." I went back to see him a week later, with the same excuse. I still was not feeling better. He did not seem surprised, and I don't know whether he believed me. He most likely was pleased that I had come back on my own, as I had promised. He granted me a further delay. A few weeks after my visit, the dentist's office was shut down. He had been thrown into prison and was about to be hanged. It appears as that he had been dealing in the prisoner's gold teeth for his own benefit. I felt no pity for him. In fact, I was pleased with what was happening to him. My gold crown was safe. It could be useful to me one day, to buy something, some bread, or even time to live. At that moment in time, all that mattered to me was my daily bowl of soup, my crust of stale bread. The bread, the soup, those were my entire life. I was nothing but a body, perhaps even less, a famished stomach. The stomach alone was measuring time. In the warehouse, I often worked next to a young French woman. We did not speak. She did not know German, and I did not understand French. I thought she looked Jewish, although she passed for Aryan. She was a forced labor inmate. Oops. One day, when Eidik was venting his fury, I happened to cross his path. He threw himself on me like a wild beast, beating me in the chest, on my head, throwing me to the ground and picking me up again, crushing me with ever more violent blows until I was covered in blood. As I bit my lips in order not to howl with pain, he must have mistaken my silence for defiance, and so he continued to hit me harder and harder. Abruptly, he calmed down and sent me back to work as if nothing had happened, as if we had taken part in a game which both roles were of equal importance. I dragged myself to my corner. I was aching all over. I felt a cool hand wiping the blood from my forehead. It was the French girl. She was smiling, her mournful smile, as she slipped me a crust of bread. She looked straight into my eyes. I knew she wanted to talk to me, but that she was paralyzed with fear. She remained like that for some time, and then her face lit up, and she said in almost perfect German, "Bite your lips, little brother. Don't cry. Keep your anger, your hate for another day, for later. The day will come, but not now. Wait. Clench your teeth and wait." Many years later, in Paris, I sat in the metro reading my newspaper. Across the aisle, a beautiful woman with dark hair and dreamy eyes. I had seen those eyes before. "Madame, don't you recognize me?" "I don't know you, sir." "In 1944, you were in Poland, in Buna, weren't you?" "Yes, but you worked in a depot, a warehouse for electrical parts." "Yes," she said, looking troubled. And then, after a moment of silence, "Wait, I do remember. Eidik, the capo, the young Jewish boy, your sweet words." We left the metro together and sat down at a cafe terrace. We spent the whole evening reminiscing. Before parting, I said, "May I ask you one more question?" "I know what it is. Am I Jewish?" "Yes, I am. From an observant family. During the occupation, I had false papers and passed as Aryan, and that was how I was assigned to a forced labor unit. When they deported me to Germany, I eluded being sent to a concentration camp. At the depot, nobody knew I spoke German. It would have aroused suspicion. It was imprudent of me to say those few words to you, but I knew that you would not betray me. Another time, we were loading diesel motors onto freight cars under the supervision of some German soldiers. Eidik was on edge. He had trouble restraining himself. Suddenly, he exploded. The victim this time was my father. "You old loafer," he started yelling. "Is this what you call working?" And he began beating him with an iron bar. At first, my father simply doubled over under the blows, but then he seemed to break down into an old tree struck by lightning. I had watched it all happening without moving. I kept silent. In fact, I thought of stealing away in order and not to suffer blows. What's more, if I felt anger at that moment, it was not directed at the capo, but at my father. Why couldn't he have had avoided Eidik's wrath? That was what life in a concentration camp had made of me. Franek, the foreman, one day noticed the gold crown in my mouth. "Let me have your crown, kid." I answered that I could not, because without that crown I could no longer eat. "For what they give you to eat, kid?" I found another answer. My crown had been listed in the register during the final medical checkup. This could mean trouble for us both. "If you don't give me your crown, it will cost you much more." All of a sudden, this pleasant and intelligent young man had changed. His eyes were shining with greed. I told him that I needed to get my father's advice. Okay, this is going to cut me off because I can only record for 15 minutes. So we ended right here. So you need to read from right here where it says go until right here where it says nothing. So not very much, just like a half a page, okay? And then make sure that you fill out your study guide up to where we're at and stop. Tomorrow I will finish reading chapter 4 to you, okay? Have a good day.